Hello, Internet. This is David Rovix with another of my very occasional podcasts, and happy to be speaking to you all now from Red Wing, Minnesota, where I am in actually the same actual house as my friend Rick DeVoe here, and I am doing this podcast for the purpose of primarily introducing folks who may be watching, most notably on the Facebook page of Fair Trade Books, to this interview, because Rick DeVoe here in the 1st Congressional District of Minnesota is running for Congress. There's going to be a special election on May 24th, and then another election on August 9th, and it's a complex and strange phenomenon that we will explain, or that he will explain, because I'm still trying to understand the whole process of special elections and districts changing, borders changing. It's a lot of stuff going on, but it's a wonderful congressional campaign that Rick is already running, and we're going to talk about that. And if you are watching on the Red Wing, on the Fair Trade Books Facebook page, or wherever else this is broadcasting, such as Popular Resistance's Facebook page, and you can comment, and I will be monitoring any comments or questions that come in for the candidate. And Rick, great to see you. Great to have you here on the podcast.
My
And
pleasure. Yeah. My pleasure,
I want to
David. Yeah.
first of all, before we get into your wonderful platform, what the heck inspired you to run for Congress? You threw your hat into the ring, is that the glove? Hat or glove? I'm not sure, but you threw something into the ring like 3 weeks ago. It's a very recent decision, and a recent special election, which happened because the congressman died. Basically, I'm not. This is not a spoiler. You're going to talk about this, but so what happened, and why did you decide to run?
Well, I last summer I went to Ohio to help Nina Turner's bid for Congress, and I was away from home for 3 months and had an opportunity to immerse myself in politics and a campaign, which had been a while since I'd done that. I went out there with a twofold purpose. One was to help elect Nina Turner, and secondly was to encourage her to run on the platform that I'm running on, which is a federal job guarantee that we're going to get into a little bit more. Because in Nina's case, some listeners will know about her and some won't, but she was Bernie Sanders' national co-chair. She's an African American woman, very charismatic, and I felt that she could be perhaps pick up the mantle from Bernie Sanders for the progressive movement, and if not that, just be a force in Congress because of her character and determination. So I was not. I really didn't get through to Nina as I would have liked to. But when I was there, I took 3 weeks out of the 3 months in a very focused effort to write down my thoughts and my strategy. I think very much like a campaign manager. I've always been a student of politics and campaigns. I've been involved in campaigns since I was 15 years old, stuffing envelopes for George McGovern. And I really do believe I have some insights into policy and strategy, but I'd never really thought it all through and laid it down. So I did that while I was there. And when I was finished, it's 15 pages long, and I called it the blueprint, emphasis on the blue, because it was meant to be. It was laying out a strategy for the Democrats to sort of remake the party, and the federal job guarantee would be the issue that they could ride to a supermajority in Congress. And so I'm almost at the point where I'm going to directly answer your question.
No, you're doing great.
So as I mentioned earlier, I got the blueprint in Nina's hands about 3 weeks before the election, her election, and as well as her campaign staff. It was a little late in the game for them to shift any of their strategy or anything they were doing. And I really didn't expect that to happen. But if she had, even in the last 3 weeks, I think if she had brought up the subject of a federal job guarantee, um, it could have made a difference for her. And ultimately, I felt that if she were to win, um, and that was a special election like ours. So it was a standalone election that got a tremendous amount of national attention because it was Nina Turner. And I really wanted her to have this as her signature issue. I wanted it to be the narrative coming out of her campaign that she didn't win just because she was Nina Turner, but she won because she took this issue on, and would bring it bring it to the fore in the process. So I came back from the campaign last summer and considered whether or not this is something I would try to do myself. And I was um, ambivalent, to say the least, about whether or not I would make a run myself for Congress. I met some folks in Ohio when I was there, a man named Keith Mundy, particularly, who's currently running the campaign manager for Jeff Seitz, who's running against Jim Jordan in Ohio.
And he has a great campaign slogan: "Vote Monday on Tuesday." I have to say, that was very very witty.
That's
Anyway,
actually
continue.
that was
different
actually
Monday?
well, the same Monday but different election.
Oops.
That's
Okay. I don't want
that's
to
when
mislead anybody. Just scratch that. Forget that
well,
comment.
that's when Keith himself ran. I'm not sure when. I think about maybe 8 years ago. He ran for Congress himself, and that was his slogan. But he's been involved in politics all his life. He worked hard to get Keith Ellison um, elected to the Democratic chair. Was unsuccessful with that, but he was very instrumental in getting Bernie really off the ground in Ohio in 2016. Very knowledgeable man. He really was impressed with the blueprint. When and to tell you a little bit about the blueprint, I laid it out in three different sections. The first was platform, and in my mind, it's a one plank platform. This federal job guarantee that I call Full Employment Plus. And secondly is the pay for, which is always an answer. It's always a challenge that the deficit hawks and the Republicans and even the Democratic establishment is going to challenge one on. If you're going to advocate
How
for
are
a
you going to pay
bold,
for that? Yep.
yeah, bold vision, you got to pay for it. So I answer the pay for question secondly, and then lastly, I called it the playbook. Each one of these sections is critically important in my view. In the
It's only
playbook,
15 pages, so better be, huh? Each
yeah,
section. Yeah.
yeah. And the
And
playbook
what's
is
the
really
playbook? Mhm.
it's really about how to conduct a campaign, or not a campaign, but this particular campaign. And this particular campaign, uh, I think it's extremely important that the as near a full emphasis as you can put on the federal job guarantee is what the difference maker is. It's gotten. I'm going to get. I know we're going
Because
to
you're
talk a
saying
little.
that's the place to put the emphasis. I mean, you know in the beginning of the blueprint that the elements of the federal job guarantee are also present within the Green New Deal that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others have been promoting, and you note also that the federal job guarantee has been in existence for about almost a century, and has and generally polls at 70% among progressives and conservatives alike, which of course makes it not only well. I mean, it's obviously a great idea. I think most anybody watching this probably agrees, but also it's fascinating to note how popular it has polled for such a long time, and it makes a lot of sense as a main plank for a platform. But talk more about this decision and the strategy there with this platform.
Yeah, and we can come back a little bit more to the blueprint later. So just um, to answer the question, I really believe in the strategy. And the one thing I will say about the playbook that it depends on a real belief in the people or in people in general, um, and the power that resides in our hands if we can um, if we can get on the same page, for a lack of a better way to put it. And I think that this platform can do it. But in the I mentioned Keith Monday, um, and unfortunately, I love Keith, and but he has made a comment that so many other campaign managers make, disparaging people in the sense of the confidence that he has that uh, people can get it. They can um, understand and act responsibly in are not just to be manipulated. In other words, and um, I believe the opposite. I believe that the more participation we have, and I just believe in the common sense and the common decency of the average person. And I believe if they get good information, that they're very reliable in the aggregate, to make a majoritarian decision about something if they're well informed. Jefferson said that if you find the people too unenlightened to make these kind of decisions, that you don't take the power away from them, you enlighten them. And unfortunately, as we all know, with political discourse has been grossly debased with all of the lies and almost of an Orwellian nature, where words and everything is getting turned inside out, and people really don't know who to trust, what a reliable source is, and that's very understandable given the circumstances. So, um,
So
so
when Bernie Sanders ran for president, he was doing really well for quite a while there, won 22 states, and then as we know, the various elements, including the leadership of the Democratic Party, ganged up against him, and I, I wonder what makes you think that you have a chance of winning when these kinds of forces may be arrayed against you as they were against Bernie.
winning the primary, winning.
Oh yeah, any of these races. I mean, it just seems to me like there are forces in the world with a lot of money and influence who don't want people like
Yes,
you elected.
yes, but I really believe that both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are. Um, well, let me speak first they're not the same. So I'll speak first of the Republican Party. They're close to being illegitimate, I think, in a lot of people's minds, due to their conduct. Just the most recent example is, um, I think it was 3 weeks ago or so, there was a unanimous, vote from the Republican Party and a decree that what we all saw on television on January 6th was a legitimate political discourse. Um, to say that that's outrageous is, I don't know what word you want to apply to that. And also, I think an obvious example is the fact that the Republican Party and the Trump campaign brought, I think, 65 different lawsuits about claiming election fraud in 8 different battleground states, and not a one of them was considered to have any merit. So that's the judiciary ruling, uh, and the Trump administration, the Republican Party, is basically on record as ignoring it, just ignoring the decision of the judiciary. So, I mean, we all learn in grade school, uh, the miracle or the fundamental soundness of checks and balances in the between the judiciary and the executive and the legislative. and they're basically just defiant of that in the Constitution. But more importantly, in answering your question, David, um, what the Democratic and Republican parties have in common is neoliberalism, and um, bo- um, the Republicans are more vulnerable, in my mind, because they don't even attempt to offer any in rhetoric. Well, they do have the rhetoric uh, uh, on the uh, on the front of relieving people's income and health insecurity with an economic program of any kind. Their one trick pony, cut taxes, cut regulations, I think is growing increasingly stale with the American public. Which in my view, for these reasons that I'm mentioning about their conduct recently, and the fact that they're virtually a wholly owned subsidiary of Trump Inc. at this point, um, they're, they're a house of cards. I really think a strong wind is going to blow them right over.
What
And
about the
the
DNC, Rick?
well,
That's who sabotaged Bernie's campaign.
it absolutely did. And they're more formidable. There's an article on my website about the tortured history of the federal job guarantee dating back to FDR. And the article points out quite clearly that it was the Democratic um, moderate to centrist establishment that has kept it from happening. Not the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party.
Talk about the
Uh,
history of this of the whole full employment thing. It's so fascinating. It's been advocated by well-known figures, including Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin, um, uh, Hubert Humphrey, to take a local Minnesota example. The very prominent figures throughout the past century or so have been advocating this program, which was part of FDR's Economic Bill of Rights, which was never fully implemented, and yet, despite the popularity of the program, I mean, I suppose this is true with a lot of other potentially popular programs that never get implemented, but this one clearly has been a popular idea for a very long time among a wide cross section of the population, and yet it never gets implemented. But talk about the history of this idea.
well, I think, as you pointed out, after FDR made the original proposal in 1944, when the victory was near. Uh, and as we all know, I think that World War II was the only instance in American history where we had full employment because we were going all out to win the war, and federal government spending, went from 30% of the economy to 50% of the economy. There's a lot to be uh, analyzed about that time. Uh, in FDR, I mean, he made the proposal when he did, I believe, because he knew that the soldiers would be returning and that factories were not going to be going at full bore, and that there's going to be a big adjustment in the economy. Um, and by the way, I won't go back that far. I was going to go back even to the New Deal, but we don't need to do that. Um, FDR was immensely popular. He was elected 4 times. The New Deal was very popular for good reason. He had managed the war to victory, and had he survived into the post-war period, I believe we would have had a federal job, enjoying the benefits of a federal job guarantee for the last 75 years. Had Martin Luther King lived, Martin Luther King made it a cornerstone of his freedom budget. And I met Coretta Scott King in Pittsburgh. I think it was in 1984, and she made it her mantra after Martin's death, a federal job guarantee. She worked later with Hubert Humphrey, very closely with Hubert Humphrey, uh, when they advanced it as part of what then became the Humphrey Hawkins Bill of 1978, but it got stripped out. It just didn't make it. It didn't make it through the legislature.
And the March on Washington in 1963, as I think most people who are sort of recollecting it in the via the public or via mass media every now and then, they never seem to mention that it wasn't called the March on Washington. It was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. It's a very direct. I mean, that was half the program there.
Right, and as we all know the that we have are still in the throes of, to say the least, of racial tensions in this country. And Martin Luther King said quite plainly many times that the race issue is not going to resolve itself until everyone, white, black, brown, could have a job with dignity that would elevate them above want. And he would have fought with us. You have, in this instance, you're talking about the history. You have two very untimely deaths that definitely could have made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, Martin Luther King
Um,
was leading the Poor People's Campaign at the time that he was killed, right? I mean, the plan was to march on Washington until
it, it was
poverty
going.
was eliminated.
It was going to be the equivalent of the Coxie. Uh, um,
The
the,
bonus army, right?
yeah,
Like something like
and
that.
yeah, well, those are two separate.
Oh, is that two different? What's it?
Yeah, yeah. Coxie
Cox's army? Was it?
was early, or
Uh-huh.
before that. Coxie, and then the bonus was those were the veterans. So, um,
Rick,
you
unless
go ahead.
yeah, no, if you, unless you have a pressing thought, I was going to ask about you have a background with you have a far more thorough understanding of a whole lot of economics than I do, and than most people do, and you're not coming into this whole idea of a full employment program just out of the blue because it seems like a good idea. You have quite an understanding of the workings of economics and how that can actually how such a program can actually be funded. And I wonder if you could talk about that.
Right. Well, I mentioned earlier that that during World War II and prior to that, in the New Deal, uh, the government spending, the opponents of the New Deal, for instance, were very concerned that it would be economically disruptive and inflationary, and the things that they normally say. And it didn't turn out to be the case. And when uh, I mentioned that government spending became 50% of the economy during World War II, and there's a couple of reasons why all of that spending was not disruptive to the economy. There's two key reasons, one of which I leverage in the Full Employment Plus program, but everybody remembers the war bonds. Uh, and that was this is where it gets I think war bonds is a good way to introduce energy savings bonds, which are a component of my plan. But what the war bonds actually did and was keep some money out of circulation um, because of all the spending. You don't want to overstimulate, as they say, the economy with too much money in circulation, because then you're going to drive prices up, and that can be inflationary. So the war bonds actually, as people bought them, it took that money out of their pockets, and it was a saving instrument, so that later on they could cash those bonds and gain the interest on them. But it was basically deferred spending. And the same thing happened with the general workforce. They needed to keep prices down, so they needed to keep wages down. And what they did is they created the pension system. That's when the whole pension system really was created, which was also deferred income. And at the time, and that's why FDR knew he could do a federal job guarantee. Government spending did not have to go back down from 50% to 30%. And by the way, that's where we're at right now. Is 30% of the economy is government spending. So if you just take the example of World War II as not being to finish on post-war period, even though most people in the business establishment particularly thought that the economy was going to tank afterwards because of the handling of the war and the continued government spending and what have you. And as we all know, the opposite occurred. We entered the biggest boom. People were cashing the war bonds, for instance, and we had great advances in economically. So we're still on the pay for question. I got a little bit of off on a tangent there, I think. But the question, David, again, is how you're gonna pay for it, and the understanding of economics.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, I just mentioned that there's a lot of fiscal space there, as economists say, when you've got that historical example of spending up to 50%, right, when we're at 30%. In my plan, Full Employment Plus. In fact, I think, David, maybe I need to do a little bit of an outline of it more so than I have
that
at
sounds
this
like
time.
a great idea.
Yeah. So what the program will do is enable anyone that needs work, whether it be part-time or full-time, to have work in their local community, working for their local community. It would be backstopped by two federal programs that I'll mention. The pay would be at a living wage, and full-time workers would get paid health care, paid childcare, and paid leave. One aspect of my plan that's different, that's one of the reasons I call Full Employment Plus, is that it'll be a national call to service for everyone, every citizen, to participate as they are able. And those that don't need the pay can take energy savings bonds in lieu of pay. And the way the energy savings bonds will work is they'll become the safe equivalent of treasury bonds, because they have the full backing of the federal government. But like war bonds, they're purposed. Treasury bonds are not. These are purposed. In the same, from an economic theory standpoint, they serve the same function as the war bonds, which is to defer spending and to take, instead of paying folks for the work that they might do locally, they get the savings bonds. So instead of them having the money in their pocket to spend, it's later. And the purposeful component of the energy savings bonds is energy conservation. The bonds themselves the annual dividends paid on the bond will correlate directly to the reduction in energy of that bondholder's utility company. So that's how the dividends would be paid on the bond. So there are people individually and collectively would be incentivized to reduce energy in that sense. So those are in the pay for, when you're paying everyone a living wage and they have health and income security, you are um, you are keeping money in the economy where it's needed most, um, and it'll be a base, a better foundation for local and the national economy. But so, so many federal and state programs to support the unemployed and the underemployed will either be um, significantly reduced or even eliminated. So there's a tremendous amount of savings on that side, uh, and the many of the proponents of the job guarantee point out that it is a um, automatic counter-cyclical mechanism. So when there's downturns, it immediately stabilizes it. I mean, when we've had the recession in 2009, and we've had the most recent recession due to the pandemic, the um, the money went first and most to Wall Street, and the Congress didn't need to deliberate about how much to spend or where they were going to spend it. The Fed just immediately um, splashed Wall Street with. We don't even know how much money, or we don't even know how much they can continue to fund. And as most of us know, um, the gains in the two recoveries from the recessions have gone um, to the top, as opposed to the top 1%, the top 10%, where the average person has not seen any any gain from that. So what would happen, instead of standing in line behind Wall Street and waiting for Congress to decide if and when they might provide some relief, uh, this is going where it's needed most. People immediately, when they get laid off, go down to their job center and have a job on the shelf waiting for them in this program. So the money, and it's backed by it's the federal government that's paying the tab for this program. So that's where it would come. That check would come from the federal government, uh, and it would be the best stabilizer for those kind of downturns that I can think of.
When you mentioned the idea of having a program that is like this sort of a stable employment for a whole lot of people, one of the things that comes to mind as an American is the military industrial complex, which is also a sort of a large employer, if not a very efficient one, in terms of the amount of jobs, good jobs that could be provided with $700 billion a year. But I wonder if you got any particular thoughts on the 700 billion and what might be done. And somebody on YouTube is asking if you would label yourself politically. How would you label yourself politically? If you would pick any particular descriptors. And I think I got one in mind. Real deal Democrat is the term you've been using, but I don't
Right.
want to put words in your mouth.
Right. Well, I think to the extent that I can avoid labeling myself, I think the better. But when I give my stump speech, I mean, I say what I have just, I have a history. So, and it really doesn't matter in some ways what you self-ascribe. It's going to be how people are going to label you. You really don't have a heck of a lot of control over that. But even in my stump speech, I said, I've had a lifetime of supporting progressive candidates and issues, and I think that progressive is the ready. I can't deny being a progressive, and I don't know what else I really would call it. But I often think of that. I often think of that we need a new language, and we need new framing. In this campaign, the way that I answer the question, I want to answer the question, is with this program. This is what I'm standing on. This is what I want you to judge me on. Is this program? And call it what you will. I mean, people called Social Security in FDR's time socialist, and it is. And you could certainly call this program socialist. What I point out, at times is look. Let's look at this in practical terms, because that's what Americans do. Um, and is it what difference will it make in my life, and is it fair? Um, it's a lot of people, justifiably in this country, from their personal experience, um, feel that the system isn't fair. Some people have greater advantage. Some people get more from the government when the government does provide some sort of a service than they've been able to receive. So, in the most practical terms, we have and this is in economist terms, we have a private sector and we have a public sector. And I think right on the face of it, any reasonable person will see that there's work and projects and what have you that are never going to be met solely by private enterprises that have a bottom line of profit. It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. And it will never be the case that, even though that's the neoliberal philosophy, and certainly the tenets of the Republican Party most espousedly. So, to me, it's a balancing of the public and private sector. We've let many things. There's so much work to be done to restore habitat and to support community, and each other, that can only be met. These needs can only be met by especially the federal government, because the federal government can, contrary to conventional talk, can never get a bill it can't pay. It has the full power of the purse. So there will never be a social security check that doesn't get paid. The whole notion of a social security trust fund that we have to worry about is baloney. So, states, we as individuals, local governments, state governments, we all have to balance our budgets. We do not have a printing press in the basement. If we did, we'd never have to borrow money from anybody. The federal government doesn't actually borrow from anybody. They create treasury bonds that are a form of savings, and they do it with a keystroke. We don't have that capacity in our state governments and federal governments. We use the currency that the federal government decides to spend into circulation. But there's no limitation on what the federal government can do. And as long as there's work to be done, there's the human resources available, the material resources are available, and the equipment is available, then the money it can and should be there. Money is not the issue. And politically, if we have the votes, we'll have the money. It's that simple.
Rick, I wonder, you've mentioned Wall Street a couple of times, and you've got a fascinating history as an activist, not only with electoral campaigns of your own and others, but with being instrumental in legalization of marijuana in California. And you've worked for many, many years in the trades and big smoky places with big machines and stuff as a union. I don't, what is when you work
in the building trades with the heat and frost insulators? Yeah.
Right. We passed a massive oil refinery. Spent quite a long bunch of time working in, and now you've been running a a local bookstore in Red Wing for the past 8 years, and notably for many listeners of this particular broadcast, you also spent quite a bit of time in Zuccotti Park during the Occupy Wall Street era. And I wonder if any of these particular activities inform your desire or willingness to run for Congress right now.
Well, I think it's a lifetime of all of the things, the learning experience of all of these things, and always throughout my life being reading and studying campaigns and politics and our history, and I feel um, impelled to do this because of the knowledge and experience that I have, um, and the belief I have in the strategy that I'm acting upon. I'm informed by, and I can't even tell you, I can't cite, well, this has had that much influence on me, and this had that much. I have no idea, but I do have a lot of confidence in um, my views as to where we stand right now in this moment in history, the kind of action that we need to take, and it just reminds me, David, of, because I didn't really talk about the Democratic Party establishment. I was talking about how the Republican Party and neoliberalism is just losing its steam, and the American people, the voting public, doesn't have any faith in either party. The Democratic Party hasn't delivered anything significant for the average person in a long time, and they know that, and they don't have any faith, or much at all, in the Democratic Party. Um, for good reason. Incrementalism. There is absolutely no space in this moment in history for incrementalism, which is why I'm going with such a big idea here that can be the change that really can make a difference in people's lives. As far as Zuccotti Park, just prior to that, I was the director of the Campaign for a Common Good Economy in Massachusetts, it was an effort to charter a democratically controlled bank that would also have a form of alternative currency amongst the account holders, which was very dynamic. In fact, when I went to, I made it to, I saw the ad in Adbusters with the ballerina on the bowl, and I said, "Oh, well, that's cool."
Advertising the upcoming protest on September
Yeah,
17th, 2011. Yeah.
right, right. And I said, "Well, that's cool." Uh, and I didn't run down there to be a part of it. I don't think anybody knew what what it could anticipate, what it would become. But once it did start, and I saw um, the potential in it, I dropped everything. I got there on day 9. I always remember that. It was day 9 of the occupation. And at that moment when I arrived, there was only 2 dozen people that were still trying to hold on there and literally occupy that space. And I was there right through the raid, is what I call it, when the camp was the space was what over it was a military operation, which of course was, we could talk about it,
You
can
call it a
talk about
raise,
that, but
R-A-Z-E, instead of a
no,
raid?
I
Or
just
did you
call it
say
the
raise?
no raid.
They took
I
everything.
don't
Oh, raid, right. Yeah, but they took
I don't
everything. They took every little thing in the park, everything.
a gross violation of civil liberties that a Judge Kennedy, in the middle of the night, uh, ruled to reopen the park, and that it was an illegal activity on the part of the NYPD. But more to the point, I went there because I thought I had something to offer, just like I'm running for Congress because I think I have something to offer. I am, at the time, what the heck was it, 11? I'm 60. I was in my early 50s. I was one of the oldest people in the park,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't go there just to be, to join in. Uh, Although that was fine. It's just it's not something that I went there with a purpose, and my purpose was to was strategic, was to get the movement to um, have its own currency. I think it was an ideal situation because it was in opposition to the existing monetary system and the way the banks dominate it. And I got I got a lot of traction there, and and there was a tremendous amount of public support right in New York for Occupy. In fact, it was $700,000 got donated to Occupy, and I was asked to be on the banking working group that would manage that money, and I didn't want to have any part of that, but what I advocated for was that use that money to backstop our own currency. And when you say backstop, what that means is if you're issuing, and there were several people that printed Occupy currency, printed it up. And my take on it, or the reason I was advocating it, is if we did produce our own currency, it would have been a way for people all over the country and all over the world to support Occupy. The way it would have worked, what I was suggesting, because you can do it all on the internet, is people open up an Occupy account, and I was suggesting $200 that we put, just give everybody $200 in Occupy money when they open up their account. And then you create a marketplace. Whoever wants to offer their goods and services, which due to the popularity of Occupy, there would have been many. I mean, who would have done that? I mean, so if you picture being wherever you were, in, let's say Indiana, and you were a supporter of Occupy, and the word went out that Occupy's got its own currency, and the way you support this movement is to go online and sign up, and when you do, you get $200. Well, what the heck does that mean? It means something when the money actually buys you something. So let's say
because how does that work? Because it would backstop. Because it would mean something and buy you something because it would be backstopped with actual
no, you
USD,
don't. No, ideally, you never even need that 700, any of that 700,000. The only time the only time in my, it wasn't even necessary to have a backstop, but what that means is if anybody wanted to convert Occupy currency to cash, that we would have had the cash to do it. That's what I mean by backstopping.
Right.
So, but let's say you go on the website and okay, somebody gave you $200. All right. Well, what's out there on the marketplace? Well, they've got a kid's bike that's $160. I can get this bike for my 10-year-old. So you click. It's a matter of clicks. Okay, put the bike in the shopping cart, and when that bike shows up in a week in a box, then that's money. I mean, it's money the way you experience money. I just bought that. So, then the thing that the next question, likely question that one asks themselves, well, I only have $40 now. How do I get more? If I'm part of this economy, how do I get more? Well, you can offer a good or service yourself, but I want to, even go beyond that. I wanted learning modules where we would actually pay people to learn, because once you're the issuer of a currency, you decide how it's going to be spent and what it's going to be spent on, and you can do something like pay people to learn. So it's and I knew this. I was talking about just prior. I was working on the campaign for a common good economy, and we had that component whereby any account holder we would issue money, uh, extra money. In other words, you'd have your normal money in the bank, but we would circulate on a currency amongst ourselves that would give everybody more money, and it would be purposeful grants and loans and things. So I've been a student of the monetary system for a long time prior to Occupy, which that's why I went there with this idea, because I understood money, and I'd worked with Stephen Zarlinga of the American Monetary Institute, Edgar Kahn from Time Dollars, which is one of the original, and right in Occupy, David Graeber. David
Mm.
Graeber was one of the was one of the um, conceptualized with a small group of people the Occupy consensus-driven. Um, I don't know, say consensus-driven, but at any rate, David Graeber I met, Charles Eisenstein in New York, who wrote Sacred Economics. But I've studied our monetary system, how it works, and how money, the science of money, what money means, how does it operate, and how can it operate, how should it operate, um, and so it's that sort of understanding that I brought. Unfortunately, in in at Occupy Liberty Square, as we called it, those who were on site. Um, quite a few money or quite a few people, well represented, didn't want anything to do with money, uh,
Yeah.
and were they just didn't, and because of the consensus process, what have you, it was just I could not move it forward um, the way I would have hoped. So
It makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Rick, when in future podcasts, you'll be interviewing other people, especially folks from the 1st Congressional District of Minnesota, where you are running for Congress. And as I have discovered, having spent the past several days out here in Minnesota barnstorming around with you, it is a very large district, and it stretches all the way down to the Iowa border. And down there in southern Minnesota, there's a lot of dairy farms, although only 5% of the ones that are left from the heyday of dairy farming. That's when I guess I was a little kid. But I know that we visited a couple of farmers recently, and probably farmers will be among the folks you'll be talking to in the coming weeks. And I wonder what do you plan to do for the farmers of Minnesota if elected?
Well, again, I always want to pivot to the full employment program, which rural areas. You go to many towns um, in Minnesota and around the country where small towns have been, in many cases, just hollowed out. There's um, family farms. I mean, you mentioned how many. There was 600. Vance, the farmer that we talked to, mentioned that there was 650,000 dairy farms at one point, and now there's only 35,000. But the full employment plan will keep people. I mean, there's an exodus from the farm and an exodus from you grew up in a small town. What are your opportunities if you wanted to stay around? And the full employment program would give you there's always work. There's always work everywhere. The physical infrastructure of many small towns, has been neglected, as well as obviously urban areas. But if people could get a job, and like the farmer we talked to, when we asked him what kind of jobs would you conceive of to utilize people in this program, and he immediately, first thing he said was, well, windbreaks. Farmers around here, we need windbreaks. You have to you need to regenerate those. They're not just they're trees that grow and die. We talked about creeks and riparian repair. He talked about neighbors that he knew were pretty destitute, in most cases elderly, that he would drive by their homes and look to see if there was smoke coming out of the chimney because he was, worried about their day-to-day existence. But he's a farmer with his hands full. And so these, elder care, these kind of things, these service-oriented jobs would be available in the Full Employment Plus program. But a direct answer beyond the Full Employment Plus opportunities is something that he himself was advocating as a dairy farmer, so that we can keep the 35,000 dairy farmers we still have. Was a program he called fair wage pricing. And what that would do is, for the first, I don't remember what volume of milk he mentioned, but for the right up to what he felt would be sustenance level for a small dairy farmer, that they would be guaranteed a price that would make it, manageable for them, so that they could sustain themselves. And then beyond that, let the market determine the price for whatever producer wanted to increase the volume of production. And that just makes so much sense to me. And I think that if I were to be, I think I'll talk about that as I am right now when the subject of ag comes up during the campaign. But once elected the representative, it's something I would likely advance. And there may be other, it's the one, as I said into one county convention conversation and Q&A, is kind of the one hole in my knowledge of policy is agricultural. And it's very important to this district because it's a largely rural district. So I think that's why you asked the question, David. Yeah.
And I love that the whole plan with the the up to 500,000 gallons of milk, the small farmer gets paid a guaranteed price, and then it's on up to the market after that. I mean, it seemed like such a great, simple plan. But Rick, can you talk about how people can get involved with your campaign, or whatever you were going to say?
Well, there's three important ways for people to support the campaign, and you do it right through the website. I encourage everybody to go to votedevoe.com, and it's a pretty comprehensive website. I think you get a real firm understanding of what we're doing if you review it. And there's a donation page and a volunteer page, so we certainly can use money. So if you want to support with a donation, that's terrific. We definitely need volunteers on the campaign. It was a very limited amount of time in a very big district, so we're going to need to be making phone calls to introduce people to the campaign. But the third thing would be to follow the campaign on social media. We are kind of starting from scratch. We've got a terrific team, including David, who's doing a lot of work.
Oh, that guy.
Most critically, David, and the work that he's doing. David wrote us a campaign song, and you got to go to the website if for no other reason than to hear that.
And it's pinned to the Facebook page. Vote DeVoe MN is the Facebook page. It's pinned there, and share it on Facebook, please.
Yes. So that's the other thing that you can do, is help build a following, which, as most of you know, elevates us in the search so that more and more people become familiar with the campaign. So those are the three very important things that you can do if you wish to support the campaign.
Any closing words in particular?
Well, I'm thinking of the blueprint right now. So the political progression here of this is a special election that we're having and it will be in advance of the November elections. So it's a bellwether election, and it's after the redistricting that's just occurred. There are only 35 competitive congressional districts in the country out of 535, and this is one of them. So people are going to be paying attention, who won. And there's always the narrative coming out of a campaign as to why somebody won or why somebody lost. And it's a very brief narrative. And if I can succeed, if I can win this special election, I'm just a bookseller from a small town, without, running a grassroots campaign, the story will be he won because he was that's all he wanted to talk about was this full employment plus program. That's all he wanted to talk about. So it must have been why he won. If he wins, and I think it has. It's my belief that this is a way to get not only to get Democrats on the same page, but to redefine what it means to be a Democrat. To make it once again the party of the people. I think it can be. I was at Occupy Wall Street. I've kind of given up on the system in the past, and tried to find a workaround. But in practical terms, my long history of working on environmental and social justice issues in one way or another, I know that this is our best vehicle. It's not easy by any means, and we're up against a very well organized structural opposition. Not only so, but I'm a believer. I believe I know it's possible. I know it's possible to win this election. I think we have a very good chance of winning this election, and it could be dramatic. It could really send some shockwaves out. And get some people paying attention. But the critical thing moving forward, and I've got a timeline for all this, it's right in the blueprint, we would have to have a Democratic nominee for president in 2024 who would carry this banner and succeed, win the Democratic nomination the same way I'm doing it, which is talking about full employment plus. And once that Democrat earned the nomination, then it would be for the same reason that I won, because they had a laser focus on this program. And then you would have, hopefully, most of the Democratic candidates for federal office, whether it be Congress or the Senate, behind the program as well. And if you succeed there in 2024, I think, and I think it's potential even 2024 to retake, to get a majority in Congress. And then I think we need to expand you have to have the power to expand the Supreme Court at this point. It has to happen. You'll need to end the filibuster. There's a progression of things, a sequence of things that have to happen to get in a position where this could actually become law. But I think it's going to get the popular support. There's nothing succeeds like success. When people see a movement growing and momentum. So my projection is that as a 2026 election, these couple of election cycles, we'll have a full employment plus plan in place, and suddenly everything shifts. And the reason we will have attained that is because of the popular support for this. Is kind of waking up the electorate, and being emboldened by achievements, electoral achievements, and once we've really delivered, we being a revitalized or Democratic Party, then we'll have their allegiance, and then anything we want to do, we could potentially accomplish.
Hear, hear. Vote DeVoe, everybody. VoteDeVoe.us, VoteDeVoe.com. Get involved with the campaign. Rick, thank you so much for speaking with us here on the podcast. People looking for this in podcast form, they can also look up This Week with David Rovics wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find it there.
thank you so much, David, for your commitment to continue working with the campaign and to do these podcasts and to do all the support and give us all the support you're going to give us with content for the social media.
My pleasure. Look out
If
for some
if
great
we make this
jingles.
work, it's not going to work without you. Um, you're instrumental in this, so I'm deeply
Let's
appreciated.
just see what we can do.
Yep. All right.
Okay, we'll sign off for now. Thank you, and see you all soon out there on the internet somewhere. Bye for
Thank you.
now.